built on credit insurance, actually. And so, again, it's an industry thing. If you're not a big corporation dealing in finance, you just don't know about it. And so this is kind of what we try to bring here to you, is kind of the best practices, tools and things that are useful for you. And again, we're going to cover about payment methods from open accounts, as I mentioned, letters of credit, wire transfer. So that's, again, a little bit more in-depth as far as what we'll be talking about here. And as far as risk, in the middle here we have, obviously, the largest risk for you being the seller. I'm going to say, if you put on this hat, I think everyone here is probably a seller. The highest risk for you as a seller is when you give, in the industry, and when you're talking with a bank, is that they refer to as open account, but it's really offering credit. You're acting as the bank. So if you come to me and you say, Robert, can you just, give me 2 weeks so, I can make payment to you? I'm not wearing that bank. I have to accept that term. Obviously, you're negotiating with me to give you some credit. That's what's called open account. That's the highest risk for me, the seller. Because again, come 2 weeks, when I'm knocking your door, you're like, Robert, you're going to give me some reasons why you can't pay me, right? I need another week. And so now you become the banker. And that's why that's the biggest risk for the seller, is when you're actually giving out credit terms. And I always give the analogy, you're really putting on the banker hat at that point. Because you're really taking in and you're extending credit. And there's tools there's things you can do that can offset, and you can even make money if you're pretty crafty when you're giving credit terms, just like if you're giving out credit to a buyer. And I'll give you some more examples on that. So again, talking about risk, there's collections that's really involved with open accounts as well. We're going to talk about letters of credit. That's kind of like the middle ground for both the buyer and the seller, because it's facilitated through the bank, and we're going to talk a lot about that. And obviously, the lowest risk for you as a seller is cash in advance, right? Is a check, handwritten check, cash? Is me giving you a check to you for payment of goods, is that cash?
Absolutely not. If you wrote the check.
How about a cashier's check from the bank? Is that cash?
Yes.
There's fraud in that too. It's not cash until it's in your bank account. Would you agree, Jerry? You guys, I'm sure in your meetings here about, even on, cashier's checks, there's fraud. Nothing's for granted anymore. Green is still green. So until it clears, whether if it's a personal check, company check, cashier's check, it's not cash. Just remember that.
Are people doing more wire transfers?
Yeah.
It's automatic if you don't have that issue?
It depends on the amount of transaction, the dollar value. And we'll touch on that, but yeah. I don't know if Jerry would have statistics. I don't follow the statistics, but I know that wire transfer is a lot common. Even if it's partial payments or finalizing a payment, I would still say wire transfers is the most common. And then again, probably documentary collections is also associated to that, where you have to pay, and then LC is probably the third most common. And there's different types of letter of credits as well. We'll touch on that. So, and of course, you can just put on the other perspective as far as you being the buyer. Anytime I'm sending you a wire transfer of $50,000 for what you're saying you're going to send me, I'm taking all the risk, man. I might just get a container full of rocks, right? So that's the biggest risk. So I like to kind of just give you a little, top 50,000 level perspective of how, things work from when you're dealing with different type of payment methods and the risks associated with that. So here we're going to talk about cash in advance, prepayment, and I already kind of touched a little bit about credit cards. But requires buyer to prepay invoice prior to seller shipping. Again, that's cash in advance, wiring the money. And this is going a little bit more in detail, what I kind of touched on a little bit here. There's no risk to you, of course. You already got the money, and if you decide to send it, okay. And if you forget, who cares? There's no risk, right? Risk to the buyer, very high. Relies on seller to ship. Again, he's hoping you don't send him in a box full of rocks. Buyer receives goods after payment. Cost low relatively to value of transaction. So normally when you do a wire transfer, you, the buyer or the initiator, is paying for that wire transfer fee. So even as you as the seller, you don't even incur it. It's already built into that. Any questions? Any feedback? Anybody? Go ahead.
Yeah, so this one we just had a cash advance from our buyer, which is excellent. And then but then of course they will ask for a discount. I said, okay, so we pay you in advance, and we just started doing Mexico, so we don't know what would be a good percentage as a discount for.
Have you done business with them already?
Well, we just did, so.
Just one time?
Yeah.
And they're asking probably for more?
Oh, yes.
Of course. Yeah, that gets in me. That's red flags for anybody. One of the things that I always recommend and develop some kind of policy, how you deal with these kind of situations, because in your absence or whoever makes those decisions, that's when things start falling apart as well. So develop a policy and share it with the rest of the people in your company, especially the ones that make the decisions. Again, you want to develop a good relationship where you feel comfortable. Obviously, you don't feel comfortable now giving credit terms, so I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it until after you've actually met them, developed that relationship with them. So, is this buyer where are they located?
The buyer is from Taiwan. But we actually needed that cash in advance in order to produce. So
That's right.
they actually should give us the money in advance. So
Is it like a deposit? It wasn't the whole thing?
The whole thing.
The whole thing? Yeah, so they were crunched, of course. How much was it, like 20,000 or 40,000? So yeah, that's a lot of money, even for sizable kind of company to wire. And so Martin Sealander and both Marianne will talk about how to help you negotiate and provide tools to help you facilitate when there is a need. Because this time you were fortunate it's 40,000, but next time they're going to come back, and aside from asking for discounts, they're going to want to negotiate some kind of credit terms where maybe they give you maybe 50% down next time. And so it's always evolving. And there's ways to mitigate that risk. And so one of the things you want to walk away with today is the credit insurance. You need to have the credit insurance as soon as you start offering any kind of credit terms. Even if they've given you 50% up front, and then the 20,000 they're going to pay you in 30 days or 60 days, you want to insure that. And there's multi-buyer policies, and Marianne will talk about that. So I don't want to steal her thunder, but that's the whole idea of what we want to convey to you today is you want to mitigate that risk. You don't want to be sitting in your desk, 4 months from now, and you're like, man, why am I not getting this money? They already have the product, and they said they were going to pay me. That's not a good situation to be in, So, you want to have some policies. You really want to have some trade references. Obviously they, because the rules change as soon as they start asking